One of my dear friends, Kathy McConnell, passed away last week. If you were ever a student at Tri-County Community College in recent years, I'm sure that you remember Kathy. She was kind of the go-to person to help students, kind of that intake where you walked up to the desk and told her what you needed on campus. She had so much knowledge when it come to helping you figure out what degree, how to get to that degree you wanted or that certificate that you wanted. She was just a wealth of knowledge about the inner workings of the college. During the time that I worked at Tri-County Community College, I worked in lots of different areas there. Before I finally ended up in Marketing's, where I finally ended up. But one year during the summer months, they asked me if I would go over to the Harper building and help Kathy. At that time, she was not only helping all the students that come in, every person that walked in the door basically, she was also answering the phone for the entire college, like she was the main switchboard operator. And so I went over basically to help her to answer the phone so that she could work with the students. So that's how I got to know her. Well, I just enjoyed working with her so much. Kathy was born and raised here in Appalachia, and she shared so many wonderful stories about her family, especially her daddy and her mother. She was also a person that had just an infectious smile and laugh. She loved to go on. So she was just a joy to be around, and so she shared so many things with me. One of the stories that I always remember, and I say it myself sometimes after she told me about it, and maybe you've heard of this saying because it is common throughout Appalachia, but she shared with me that her daddy would often, if they were sitting down to supper or to eat, and maybe, you know, it wasn't Thanksgiving dinner, but it was still food, he would say, "Sis, it's better than a snowball, ain't it?" Well, if you think about it, if you were hungry, anything would be better than a snowball because there's no sustenance in it, you know. But she would tell me great stories like that. And her husband, Stanley, he's also wonderful to be around. And he has that same kind of teasing personality and loves to go on. He would come over, and he worked at the college at that time. He worked in the welding department, and he would ask her, you know, "Well, what's my old woman doing? Are you keeping my old woman in line?" And he would go on with her. He loved Kathy, I mean, beyond belief, but he was someone that loved to tease, so he would tease her, and she knew that. She knew that it was in teasing. My husband, Matt, is like that. He likes to tease and go on with me. There's one video, I can't remember which one it is of ours, but he's fixing his plate, and I ask him if it looks good or if he thinks it'll be good or something, and he says, "I reckon it'll do." Well, he was only teasing me. He loves to eat my cooking, but a lot of people think he was actually being mean to me, but he was not. But Stanley was like that too, is like that too. He loves to tease and go on. Every time I'd see him, even till this day, he'd ask me, he liked Corey and Katie a lot, and he would ask me, "How's my girls? You know, I've not seen them around, and are they still mean as striped snakes?" And so he was a great one to go on to, but the relationship, I guess, between him and Kathy was what was so sweet and so special, and kind of reminds me of me and Matt when I really think about it. But during those times, of course, Kathy and I talked a lot about Appalachian Foodways. We both loved to cook for our families. We loved to eat. We would eat lunch together sometimes. We call it dinner here, but in that summer that I worked in there answering the phone, we would eat our lunch there together. And so one day she was telling me about this chocolate cake. And she said, "Oh, it's old as the hills, the recipe is, but it's real easy to make, and Stanley loves it. It's one of his favorite recipes for me to make, one of his favorite cakes." And I said, "Well, no, I don't know that tell me about it, make sure that I know about it." And she said, "Oh, I'm sure you do. It's old as the hills." And then she started describing it to me, and I said, "No, I've never had that cake at all." So I come home, of course she wrote down the recipe for me and made it, and it is easy and it is good. I can see why it's one of Stanley's favorites. So since that time, I have seen the recipe in some of my old cookbooks. Sometimes it's called a boiling water cake or an eggless chocolate cake, so you may already be familiar with it. But I'm going to show you how easy it is to make Kathy's chocolate cake today. So for the first part, there's kind of two parts of it. We're going to add 1 cup, I've already got my ingredients measured out. We're going to add 1 cup of self-rising flour, 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of cocoa, 1/2 cup of milk, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And then we're going to mix that up together. Okay, now that I've kind of got that all mixed up pretty smoothly, I'm ready to put it in my pan. Now Kathy told me that she used a deep dish pie plate is what she used to make hers in, and I've done that before. I've kind of got a 2-quart casserole that I've used before, and today I'm going to use just an 8x8 glass baking dish for it. So you just put that part in. Set it aside, and now I'm going to do the second part, which is to mix 3/4 cup sugar, 1/4 cup of cocoa, and over on the stove I've got 1.5 cups of water boiling, so I'm going to grab that. And I'm going to mix that up together. Okay, sorry for that little interruption. When I was adding all this in, I realized I did not put the oil in the cake. So I quickly mixed it in. Now it's in there. Now I'm ready to continue. So you'll do better than I did. And as always, the link to the recipe will be in the description below. So now that I've actually added the oil in, that wouldn't have been very good, would it? I'm ready to just pour this part that I've been mixing up. I'm just going to pour it on top. Now I'm going to bake it at 350 for about 30 minutes, and once it's completed I will show you how wonderful it turns out. As you can see, the cake turned out wonderful. It goes so good with some vanilla ice cream, and Mayfield is my favorite brand. You'll have to tell me what your favorite brand of ice cream is. The way the cake makes, how you do it in those 2 separate steps, the icing or frosting, if you will, ends up being on the bottom. So that's that kind of that chocolatey syrup looking stuff that you saw. So now I can't wait to take a bite of it while it's good and hot. So good. Goes really good with ice cream, like I said, but also the cake part goes really good with a glass of milk, a cup of coffee even. So I hope you enjoyed seeing how to make the cake that my dear friend Kathy taught me to make so many years ago. As she said to me, it's probably the same for you. You may already be familiar with the recipe. Maybe your grandma taught you to make it. Maybe someone from church, or maybe a dear friend like Kathy. I hope you'll continue to drop back by often though and help me celebrate Appalachia, which is a whole lot of foodways like me and Kathy used to love to talk about. And like her father would tell her, pretty much all of them, they're way better than a snowball.